Hey guys, welcome back to No More Cavities. Today we are discussing the inferior view of the skull. So the first thing we will discuss are the bone present in the inferior view of the base of the skull. The one here present in purple color is known as the maxilla. Then this is the palatine bone. This is the vomer. This is the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone consists of the lesser wing, the greater wing, the pterygoid process, and the body of the sphenoid. This bone is the temporal bone. This bone is the parietal bone, and this is the occipital bone. The bone present here is the zygomatic bone. This bone is known as the palatine bone, which comprises of the horizontal plate, the perpendicular plate, and the pyramidal process. The horizontal plate forms the posterior portion of the hard palate. The perpendicular plate forms the lateral wall of the nasal cavity, while the pyramidal process, which comprises the lesser palatine canal where the lesser palatine nerves run through. These are the paired parietal bones, one on the each side of the skull. The next bone is the wasp-like bone or a butterfly-shaped bone known as the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone consists of a lesser wing, a greater wing, a body, and the pterygoid processes. And it forms the floor of the middle cranial fossa. The next bone, which is known as the temporal bone, and the temporal bone comprises of four parts known as the squamous part, the tympanic part, the styloid process, and the petrous part. This is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone, which join with the temporal process of the zygomatic bone via a suture known as zygomatico-temporal suture. The next bone is the zygomatic bone, which are also known as the cheek bones. The zygomatic bone is mostly sensitive to fractures. And the zygomatic bone comprises of the three processes known as the frontal process, the temporal process, and the maxillary process. The last bone here will be the vomer, separating the left and right side of the nasal cavity. Here is the structure known as the pterygoid gemellus, which is the bilateral extension of the medial pterygoid plate. It holds an importance because a muscle known as the tensor veli palatini muscle curves around it. This structure here is known as the medial pterygoid plate, while this structure here is known as the lateral pterygoid plate. These whole form the pterygoid process of the sphenoid bone. The lateral plate of the pterygoid process forms the medial wall of the infratemporal fossa. The medial surface of the lateral plate of the pterygoid process forms the part of the pterygoid fossa. The lateral pterygoid muscle and the medial pterygoid muscle attach to the lateral plate of the pterygoid processes. The medial plate of the pterygoid process form the part of the corona and the part of the pterygoid fossa by its lateral wall. The medial pterygoid plate is narrower and longer than the lateral pterygoid plate. This whole thing here is known as the palatine process of the maxilla, forms the roof of the mouth and the floor of the nasal cavity. This is known as the zygomatic process of the maxilla. This suture is known as the transverse palatine suture separating the two palatine processes of the maxilla. This suture is known as the median palatine suture, which join the two horizontal palatine processes of the maxilla. Failure of the joining of the median palatine suture, it will result in an anomaly known as the cleft palate. These processes are known as the mastoid notches, present medially to the mastoid process. The mastoid notch is also known as the digastric fossa, as the anterior belly of the digastric muscle gets its attachment from there. These are known as the choana, which are the opening of the posterior nasal aperture present between the nasal cavity and the nasopharynx. Choana are separated by vomer. This structure is known as the external occipital crest, which is a ridge present on the occipital bone. And there are lines which goes around the occipital bone known as the inferior knuckle line and the superior knuckle line. The external occipital crest gives attachment to the nuclear ligament. Inferior knuckle line gives attachment to the semi-spinalis capitis muscle. While the superior knuckle line gives attachment to the occipitalis, splenius capitis, trapezius, and sternocleidomastoid muscle. It was all about the bony structures and the bony landmark present in the inferior view of the skull. We will be discussing the foramina and fissure in the next lecture. Thanks for watching.